You know what's absolutely insane? There are people still buying million-dollar beachfront condos in towns where the streets flood during high tide. Not during hurricanes. Not during storms. Just regular high tide. The moon pulls the ocean, and suddenly Ocean Drive is a canal. And real estate agents are still selling these properties like it's 1985. Waterfront living. Ocean views. Beach access. Yeah, beach access that includes wading through salt water in your living room twice a month. I'm talking about coastal towns where sea level rise isn't a future problem. It's happening right now, where property values are tanking because buyers are finally doing the math on flood insurance that costs 10 grand a year and infrastructure that's already failing. This isn't climate doomerism. This is just economics. When your house floods regularly and insurance is unaffordable, your property value goes down. Shockingly simple. So today we're going through 16 coastal towns where sea levels are actively destroying property values. Not might destroy, are destroying right now with real data and real consequences. Let's get into it. Here's why this matters and why coastal property owners are quietly panicking. Sea levels have been rising for decades, but the rate is accelerating. In some coastal areas, we're seeing 6 to 8 inches of rise since the 90s. That doesn't sound like much until you realize that 6 inches means the difference between occasional flooding and constant flooding. High tides that used to be no problem now flood streets. Storm surge for moderate storms now reaches areas that used to be safe. And king tides, the highest tides of the year, are turning parts of coastal towns into temporary lakes. The towns on this list are experiencing what scientists call sunny day flooding. No storm. No hurricane, just high tide plus sea level rise equals water in the streets. Some places this happens a few times a year, others it's monthly or more. And here's where property values come in. People are finally connecting the dots. If your street floods regularly now, it's going to flood more frequently in the future. If flood insurance is $8,000 a year now, it's going to be $12,000 soon. If the city is spending millions on adaptation now, your taxes are going up, so property values are adjusting to this reality. Not everywhere, not all at once, but in the most vulnerable areas, prices are stagnating or declining while inland areas keep appreciating. The market is pricing in climate risk whether sellers like it or not. The coastal property dream was always by beachfront. Watch it appreciate forever. That dream is breaking in these 16 towns. Some properties are still selling fine. But the most vulnerable ones, the ones at sea level with regular flooding, those are becoming harder to sell and losing value. Insurance companies are leading the charge. They're raising rates, pulling out of markets, or refusing coverage altogether. When insurance becomes unavailable or unaffordable, property values tank. Because most buyers need mortgages and mortgages require insurance. So we're watching this slow-motion collapse in coastal property values in the most vulnerable areas. Some towns are trying to adapt, building seawalls, raising roads, installing pumps. But adaptation is expensive and it's not keeping up with the water. Number 16. Annapolis, Maryland, starting with Maryland's capital, where the Chesapeake Bay is slowly reclaiming downtown. Annapolis has seen around a foot of sea level rise since 1950. King tides now flood downtown streets 40 to 50 times a year. That's almost weekly. Businesses have raised their entrances. The city installed pumps. But the water keeps coming. Annapolis is beautiful. Historic. Sailing capital. But parts of downtown are becoming uninsurable. Flood insurance for ground floor businesses and residences near the water is astronomical if you can get it. Property values in the most flood-prone areas have stagnated, while areas on higher ground keep appreciating. The market is sorting properties by elevation now. Annapolis is where colonial history meets rising tides, and both are flooding. Number 15. Beaufort, South Carolina, the low-country town where low is becoming a problem. Beaufort is barely above sea level to begin with. Sea level rise of 6 to 8 inches has made high tides a regular flooding event. The historic downtown floods during king tides. Marsh areas are expanding inland. Beaufort is charming, old south coastal beauty, but it's sinking and flooding. Property values in the lowest areas are soft. People are starting to factor in flood risk when buying. The town is trying to adapt, but the geography is against them. You can't just raise an entire historic downtown, so they're living with more flooding. Beaufort is where southern charm meets southern flooding. Number 14. Savannah, Georgia. Georgia's coastal jewel where the Savannah River is rising into the historic district. Savannah has seen similar sea level rise to Charleston, around a foot since the 50s. The historic riverfront floods during high tides now. The city has installed floodgates and pumps, but it's a constant battle. Savannah is gorgeous. Historic squares. Riverfront. Tourism. But the water is rising and the infrastructure wasn't built for this. Flood insurance in River Street area buildings is expensive and getting worse. Property values downtown are holding better than other cities on this list because Savannah is popular. But the most vulnerable properties are starting to see buyer hesitation. Savannah is where Spanish moss meets rising water, and both are dripping. Number 13. Atlantic City, New Jersey, the shore town where boardwalk flooding is becoming routine. Atlantic City already had problems. Sea level rise isn't helping. The boardwalk and surrounding areas flood during storms and increasingly during high tides. The city is trying to build resilience, but it's expensive and slow. Atlantic City's property market was already struggling. Add flood risk and it's worse. Beachfront properties that should be premium are hard to sell when buyers see regular flooding. The casinos are adapting with money. Regular homeowners don't have casino budgets, so they're stuck with rising flood insurance and falling property values. Atlantic City is where gambling met flooding and the house is losing. Number 12. Galveston, Texas, the Texas island where hurricanes and sea level rise are a brutal combination. Galveston is a barrier island. It's always been vulnerable, but sea level rise is making everything worse. The seawall protects some areas, but not all. Regular flooding during high tides is increasing. Galveston property values are weird because Texas has no zoning and the market is volatile. But the most flood-prone areas are definitely seeing softer values. Insurance is a nightmare. The island keeps building, but each hurricane and each flood event reminds people that barrier islands are temporary in geological time, and that time might be shorter than mortgages. Galveston is where Texas meets the Gulf, and the Gulf is winning. Number 11. Key West, Florida, the Florida Keys island where the highest point is 18 feet above sea level. Key West has seen over 8 inches of sea level rise since the 90s. King tides flood streets regularly. The island is installing pumps and raising roads, but it's expensive and piecemeal. Key West property values are still high because it's Key West, but the market is starting to differentiate by elevation. Properties at 5 feet elevation are selling slower than properties at 15 feet. Insurance is brutal. Flood insurance plus hurricane insurance means $10,000 to $20,000 a year or more for many properties. That's a mortgage payment just for insurance. Key West is where Hemingway drank, and now the ocean is drinking the island. Number 10. Ocean City, Maryland, the barrier island resort town where beach nourishment is a full-time job. Ocean City loses beach to erosion constantly. The town spends millions pumping sand back onto the beach. Sea level rise is making this worse and more expensive. Property values in Ocean City are holding for now because it's a vacation destination. But the insurance situation is getting scary, and buyers are starting to ask questions about long-term viability. The town is committed to staying above water, literally, but the cost of adaptation is going to fall on property owners through taxes and special assessments. Ocean City is where summer fun meets winter storms and rising seas. Number 9. Hampton Roads, Virginia, Norfolk, Virginia Beach, the Virginia region where military bases are flooding and threatening the local economy. Norfolk has seen over 1.5 feet of sea level rise since 1930. That's one of the highest rates on the East Coast. The naval base floods. Downtown floods. Neighborhoods flood during king tides. The military is concerned because Norfolk Naval Station is critical infrastructure. The city is spending hundreds of millions on flood mitigation, but it's not keeping up. Property values in the most vulnerable areas are declining. Buyers don't want to deal with regular flooding and rising insurance costs. Some neighborhoods are seeing 10 to 20% declines from peak. Norfolk is where the Navy meets the rising ocean, and both are in trouble. Number 8. Fort Lauderdale, Florida, the South Florida city where the drainage system is overwhelmed. Fort Lauderdale is just north of Miami and experiencing similar problems. Sea level rise is pushing salt water into the drainage system. High tides mean the drains back up and streets flood. Property values in low-lying areas are soft. Buyers are getting smarter about elevation. Properties at 8 or 10 feet elevation are fine. Properties at 3 feet are struggling to sell. Insurance is expensive and getting worse. Some properties are becoming uninsurable. When that happens, only cash buyers can purchase. Limited buyers means lower prices. Fort Lauderdale is where canals became streets and streets became canals. Number 7. Charleston, South Carolina, the low-country city where history is flooding. Charleston has seen over a foot of sea level rise. The historic downtown floods during king tides. The Market Street area, iconic Battery, all flooding more frequently. Charleston property values are still strong because it's Charleston. But the market is differentiating. Properties on the peninsula at low elevation are appreciating slower than properties inland or at higher elevations. The city is spending massive amounts on drainage and flood mitigation. Dutch dialogues.seawalls.pumps. But it's a losing battle against geography and rising seas. Charleston is where antebellum architecture meets modern flooding. Number 6. Corpus Christi, Texas, the Texas Gulf Coast city where hurricanes and sea level rise compound. Corpus has seen around a foot of sea level rise. The Bay Area floods regularly. Hurricane risk is high and getting worse as seas rise and storms intensify. Corpus property values are lower than most coastal cities anyway, but the flood-prone areas are seeing real declines. Insurance is prohibitive. Buyers are scarce. The city is trying to adapt, but resources are limited. This isn't Miami money. It's South Texas. So adaptation is slower and cheaper. Corpus Christi is where Texas Gulf meets Texas reality. Number 5. New Orleans, Louisiana, the city that's already below sea level and sinking while seas rise. New Orleans is losing the race against water. Subsidence plus sea level rise means the city is relatively lower every year. The pumping system is constantly working. Storms are existential threats. Property values in New Orleans are complicated by levee protection and flood zones. But the most vulnerable areas, especially outside the main levee system, are seeing value declines. Insurance is astronomical or unavailable. The state citizens program is overwhelmed. People are leaving areas that flood regularly. New Orleans is where the city fights the water, and the water is patient. Number 4. Miami Beach. Florida, the international destination where Miami Beach is literally installing pumps on every corner. Miami Beach has spent over $500 million on pumps and raised roads. Because without them, large parts of the city would flood during king tides. That's not hyperbole. That's reality. Property values in Miami Beach are weird. Luxury properties are still selling for insane prices. But ground floor condos and properties at low elevation are struggling. The market knows which properties are going to flood first. Insurance is brutal. $10,000 to $20,000 a year or more is common. Some properties can't get insurance at any price when mortgages require insurance. That kills the market. Miami Beach is where Art Deco meets engineering marvel meets rising ocean. Number 3. Venice. Florida, not Italy. The Florida Gulf Coast town where rising seas are not romantic. Venice, Florida has seen significant sea level rise, and it's a low-lying area to begin with. King tides flood neighborhoods. The city is trying to adapt, but it's expensive. Property values in the most flood-prone areas have declined 10 to 20% from peaks. Buyers are factoring in flood risk. Insurance costs are major parts of buying decisions now. Venice is a retiree haven, but retirees on fixed income can't absorb $10,000 a year in flood insurance. So they're selling or not buying in the riskiest areas. Venice, Florida is where retirement dreams meet flooding reality. Number 2. Virginia Key and Key. Biscayne, Florida, the Miami area keys where elevation is luxury. These islands south of Miami Beach are experiencing similar flooding issues. Sea level rise means regular tidal flooding in low areas. Property values are holding better than other areas because of wealth. But even wealthy buyers are getting cautious. They're paying premiums for Higher elevation properties, ground floor condos are harder to sell. Properties at 3 or 4 feet elevation are seeing soft demand. Insurance is a problem even for the wealthy. When you're paying $20,000 a year to insure a $2 million condo, you start questioning the investment. The keys are where Miami's wealthy live, and even they're worried about water. Number 1. Miami Shores in North Miami, Florida at number 1. The Miami area neighborhoods where property values are declining most dramatically, the low-lying areas of North Miami and Miami Shores. These neighborhoods are barely above sea level. 6 to 8 inches of sea level rise has turned them into flood zones. King tides flood streets. Storm drains back up. Septic systems fail from saltwater intrusion. Property values in the most vulnerable blocks have declined 20 to 30% from peaks. Some properties are essentially unsellable. Insurance is unavailable or unaffordable. These aren't beachfront properties that commanded premiums. These are working class and middle class neighborhoods. People who bought homes decades ago now can't sell them for what they paid. The market is brutal. Properties that should be worth $400,000 are selling for $300,000 or less. Because buyers know the flooding is going to get worse, and insurance is going to get more expensive or disappear entirely. Miami Shores and North Miami are where the American dream of homeownership is drowning in real time. So what does all this mean? First, sea level rise is not a future problem in these towns. It's a current problem affecting property values right now. The market is pricing in climate risk, whether politicians acknowledge it or not. Second, insurance is the leading indicator. When insurance companies pull out or raise rates dramatically, property values follow down, because most buyers can't get mortgages without insurance. Third, adaptation is expensive and often inadequate. Cities are spending hundreds of millions on pumps, seawalls, and raised roads. It's helping, but it's not solving the problem, and taxpayers are footing the bill. Fourth, the property market is differentiating by elevation now. In the same town, properties 10 feet higher are appreciating while properties at sea level are declining. Elevation is the new location premium. And fifth, this is going to accelerate. Sea level rise is accelerating. More areas will experience regular flooding. More properties will become uninsurable. More values will decline. So there you have it. 16 coastal towns where sea levels are actively destroying property values. This isn't about whether climate change is real. The market has decided. Insurance companies have decided. And property values are reflecting that decision. For people living in these areas, the options are limited. You can adapt, raise your home, install flood barriers, pay the increasing insurance, or you can sell before values decline further, or you can stay and hope. For people considering buying in coastal areas, this is a warning. Elevation matters. Flood zone matters. Insurance costs matter. Don't buy a property that floods now hoping it'll appreciate. The market is moving the opposite direction. The coastal property dream was always buy near water, watch value rise. That dream is inverting in the most vulnerable areas. Water views are becoming water damage. Premium locations are becoming unsellable. Some coastal areas will be fine. High elevation, good. Infrastructure, wealthy tax base for adaptation. But low-lying areas in middle-class towns? Those are struggling, and it's going to get worse. So here's my question for you. If you own coastal property in a flood-prone area, are you selling now or riding it out? And if you're buying, would you still buy in these areas, or is the risk too high? Let me know in the comments, because sea level rise is reshaping coastal property markets, and we need to talk about it honestly. And if you found this sobering but informative, maybe subscribe. We cover housing markets, climate reality, and economic consequences of environmental change. Someone has to document the slow-motion coastal property collapse. Might as well be me.